Ladies and gentlemen, you are now tuned in to 2 AM Radio.
Hi everybody, welcome to the 2 AM Radio Show. Today we have a super special guest. You must be living under the deepest rock in the NFT world if you don't know who this guy is. Absolute AI master. This is really special for me, man, because it's been a year in the making. It's finally here. I'm so excited, ladies and gentlemen. Blac AI, man. Thank you so much for coming up here once again, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate the patience. I know it's been a while, but I'm stoked to be here, and I know this is going to be a good one. So, yeah, let's fucking go.
Let's go, man. So, first question. At what moment in your career did you feel like you finally mastered AI?
You asked that as if I feel like I have.
Definitely looks like it.
I mean, I just I feel like there's a learning curve with almost every project. That's sort of how I look at it. It's like I feel like I master certain workflows for certain projects. I don't know if I've mastered AI by any means. I mean, dude, all the stuff that comes out all the time, like no one's mastered this so far. But I think that when I very first started, before I was even on Twitter, I built an AI with a developer that was based off of like VQGAN and VDiff and a few other things. And I started prompting with that stuff before I ever even knew there was like a community of people. And I'd spent like months doing that in the silo. And I think that process taught me a lot. It was like an introduction to prompting by yourself on an island. And I think that really, I look back on that, and there's ways that I even prompt things now and use AI now where I look at it the exact same as I did then. And I think if I had started, like last year when AI was hyped and all this stuff was coming out and all these were like, oh, here's your prompt and here's this thing, I think I would have learned differently. I would have learned based off of what other people were doing instead of like testing the fences, which is essentially what I was doing on my own. And I think that really influenced how I look at the process. And then I think that also taught me, as you move from like model to model or tool to tool or, image versus text or audio or whatever, like every one of them sort of speak their own language. And to me, there's always this sort of introduction process of like working with it and understanding it and say, oh, if I say X, you paint Y, then I want to do Y and see if you do Z, and like trying to learn patterns like that. And I think that's sort of how I look at it. So I think it's a constant learning process, to be honest. And I think I personally like that aspect. Like I like feeling like it's something that I can constantly improve upon. And I also feel like whenever there's an update to something, I kind of just jump in, especially with Midjourney, whenever they do an update, it's like I jump in, try to test it out, see what it can do, see what it doesn't want to do, then try to break it and make it do the things it doesn't want to do. And then that becomes almost like I guess maybe a contrarian way to kind of work with the tools. Instead of working like downstream, it's more like fighting my way upstream to see what I can like force it to do. And then I end up getting something that's like, I feel really unique. And then I'm really happy with it. And then, I kind of flex on that for a while and see what else I can do with it. And I know a lot of people have a very similar kind of exploratory process. And I think that's what's so great about it, to be honest. That's why I like working with different ideas and different aesthetics and that sort of thing, while keeping sort of like a core philosophy behind the work that I do. It allows me to kind of just like branch out and test and learn all this, other stuff. So it's definitely a process, and I feel like it's ongoing and may not ever stop.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So in some way, would you say that nobody can really master AI? It's like its own beast?
I don't know if, I guess I would probably rephrase the question. I think you can master your own process with it. I don't know if you can master it, because it's
right.
It's like, for example, if, let's say something like Photoshop, for example, like Photoshop, I would identify myself as an expert in Photoshop. I've been using it since I was like a teenager. Like it's been a long time, and I've had every version for the last, 20 years at this point. So to me, I think I'm an expert in it. Am I like a master at it? Like, do I know every single thing there is? No, I don't. And I don't think, I think it just depends on the type of work you're doing, the type of projects you're doing. That influences the way that you use a tool. And that's how I look at AI. Like, I think that it's very much like a sandbox. And every single tool and program and model even are like all their own sandboxes. And I think it just depends on like how you work with those things. I think you can like master certain things that are based off of whatever your workflow is and the intention that you have behind creating the work. But I don't know if, like, for example, if I were to create something that's like a 3D blender object or something, like, I don't know if I would master that unless I really, really like worked on that forever. But I wouldn't be able to just like turn it on and do it. It would still be a learning process to achieve that specific intended result. And so I think as you use a tool and use a program, use a different type of creative process, you become more masterful at it over time. But I think the actual thing itself is almost independent of that. It's an interesting philosophical way to look at it, but I think it's independent of your process, but you can master your process.
Yeah. So in some way, you can't really chisel the tool. You just have to understand what you want out of it. So in some way, you master yourself, but not the program. It's on its own. So it's practically what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think like traditionally artists have. I think that if you look at, say, like painters or any type of like more traditional art, anything outside of AI, really, it takes a really long time to not just master the workflow and process, but to really like see through an idea, to see it all the way through. Like sometimes, painters 100 years ago, it would take 20 years to like go through an entire body of work, a whole lineage of work. A period of exploration and master crafting and all these things. And you learn through all of that. You learn through whatever the final result is of every single piece. And I think with AI, what ends up happening is you see this pattern of, I mean, I see it in myself, I see it in others too, but you see this pattern of you find a thread, in your mind, or you do something, you explore something and you're like, oh shit, that's awesome. I wonder what else I can do with that. I wonder if that fits in with this. I wonder if I can do this with that. Or what if I do that with this? And you start kind of questioning and exploring, and then you just go down this rabbit hole and you see this thing all the way through, just like artists would do traditionally, but it's just not taking 20 years. It takes like 2 weeks, and I think that's in a way, I think it's a really interesting thing, because I think there's two sides to that coin, right? I think on one side, it's like the time involved in creating a body of work, a lineage of work, derivatives of an idea over 20 years. It's a lot of time, but you also experience a lot, and you have a lot of thoughts on that. You have a lot of philosophy on it and the whole process. And it's a very much like a mastercraft experience. And in this space, with AI, I feel like even though you can see through an idea all the way to the end in like 2 weeks rather than, 10 years or something, the challenge is like, are you kind of like, shorting yourself somehow? But I also think you're able to, I mean, when else in human history have artists been able to produce thousands of works in a matter of a week?
Right.
Right. Like, when has that ever been able to be the case? So it's like, is it the end result that matters, or is it the journey, or is it sort of like a mix of both? And so I think like we're able to explore these ideas all the way through, and everyone's process is going to be different, probably for every single one of those explorations, at least varying to some degree, obviously, because there's different results. So I don't know. I think about that often, because it's like, I don't want to rush things. I think meaningful art takes time. I think that's really important. And in this space, I feel like everything's really rushed. And so with AI, we have the ability to create things very fast, but that doesn't mean that the idea is fast. The workflow can be fast and the process can be fast, but the idea and the meaning behind it, the intention behind it, still has to be this like real, genuine, organic thing. It can't just be rolling the dice all the time. You may find your path that way, but it doesn't mean that that's the journey. The journey is what you put into it. And I think that legitimately takes time to build out. And so there's an interesting mix between the two, because it's almost like the tools move faster than your thought process about what you're creating, so.
Yeah, and it's like when I was creating I was I always thought about what you would do because I had a lot of moments, man, when I felt like I wanted to choke the fucking program because it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And I always wondered, man, when you're creating, how do you handle your frustration, or do you have any at all? Are you just like, all right, I'm letting it go, I'm letting it do its own thing, and what happens happens.
Um, I think my frustrations lie in other parts of this world of things. I don't really have frustrations when it comes to the creative process. I started out my early career as a designer, as a graphic designer, and then I went into being an art director and a creative director, and then I was like a marketing director, and I ran some agencies and like shit like that. And to me, throughout that entire process, there is this kind of problem solving element to everything, especially when you roll it all the way back and boil it down to just like graphic design. Like graphic design at its core is problem solving, putting a headline on a page with the right image and the right location and putting this here and that size. And is the color right? And can someone read it? And is it the right specs? And like, it's a problem solving equation. And so when I look at what I create, I know what my intended result is going to be, in the very least conceptually, maybe not specifically visually, because a lot of times I like the randomness and the chaoticness that happens with AI. So I embrace that a little bit, but it's still problem solving. Like it's still something that I don't get frustrated about problem solving. Like I enjoy that, to be honest. A part of me is like, oh man, it doesn't want to do that. Well, I'm going. I guess I'm a little bit spiteful, maybe. Now that I'm kind of thinking this out loud. But I'm a little bit spiteful with the process because it's like, oh, you don't want to do that. Well, I think I'm going to make you do that now. So it's sort of like, I feel like that's sort of how I look at it. It's like, how can I break this thing? As I said a while ago, it's like when a new update or something comes out, I like to like test it and see what it can do and then what it doesn't really want to do. And then that's usually the way that you see a whole collection come out from me that it's like based off of what I don't think it wanted to do. So it's like, I think maybe I embrace that chaos a little bit, but I look at it as problem solving, and then I abandon things. And I think that jumping around a lot is not like the best thing because you end up not having this kind of like core visual identity, which is so important. But it's important for the commercialization aspect, but I don't think it's important for like the artistic expression aspect. And so to me, like, and I've said this a bunch on Spaces, so I don't want to be redundant, but like I want to have like a through line that is my philosophy of things, like my belief system of things, and then that becomes the thing that is the constant in the equation of all the work. And my variables can be if it's photorealistic or if it's collage or if it's surrealism or whatever, as long as it fits within my ecosystem of thought, then maybe I'll be known for that ecosystem rather than a specific visual identity. Then that kind of frees me to break shit along the way, So I think that's a part of the process too.
So this is interesting because you speak a lot about chaos and doing things freely, but do you ever feel like you have to follow a certain rule, a certain signature style? Because when you create your art, at least what you put out, it seems very disciplined. It like when it's a Blac AI piece. But do you ever feel like when you're creating, you gotta like put yourself back in order? Go, okay, I'm going a little off, course. Like, do you have to correct yourself?
Yes, I guess the short answer is yes. I think there's like this internal filter that happens. I'll give an example. When the style reference update came out from Midjourney a couple of weeks back or a month or so ago, whenever that was, Delta and I were hanging out, kind of having a chat about it, and we were kind of talking about like how easy it would be to replicate someone's work as like a negative thing. It's like, man, like,
Right.
This kind of creates a pathway for people to just like copy shit. And because we do this a lot, whenever updates come out, he and I usually sit down. We're like, okay, let's break this down, and we have like we'll jump on Discord or something and talk for like 2 hours and go through and like rip through it, And we were doing it for each other's work. Like, he was messing with my surrealism stuff, I was working with his stuff, and like I recreated, almost exactly a piece of his. And I was like, look, I did this with literally like a 4-word prompt in your image, man. Like, and I was sort of like, shit, like this is kind of, this makes me question things, I guess. And his response was, yeah, but is it a delta? And then he sends something of mine that looks good, and he's like, but is it a black? And I'm like, I don't think the answer is yes. I think it's no. I can look at it, even though I made something that has a very similar aesthetic, but I know, like, I understand the energy behind like Delta's work. So when I look at Delta's work, I can pick it out, and I know that's Delta. And I don't think that comes from the machine. I think that comes from the perspective behind our own self-curation. That's where I think that comes from. Because, and this goes back to your question, the reason why I break that down is when I go through a lineage of work and I'm looking at all these ideas, thousands of them or whatever, as we all do, I look at them and I know which ones hit the mark for me. I know which ones are it. Like, oh, that one. I know that's the one, and you pull it out. And I think that if someone else were going through the same list of things, raw, like on your Midjourney feed or something, would they be able to pick out the same one that you pick out? I don't know if that's the case. I don't think so. Maybe if they're trying to be like, which one would Blac pick out? Maybe they would be able to do that. But I think when I go through it, it's like, I know which one resonates for me. Which one hits that purpose? Which one hits the intention, the original concept that I had, the reason behind what I'm doing? Does it check all these boxes, And then I pull that out, and then that one, then I'll edit it. And, usually there's a lot of post-processing and everything else in it that kind of polishes that thing off. And then, as you said, it comes out and it looks like it's, very, very much like well-intended to be that way. And it's because it is, there's a lot of thought that goes in behind to even just pulling something raw and posting it. It's very much intentional. And it's like, there's something about that there's logic and there's sort of deductive reasoning there, but then there's also this like emotional aspect and like an expressive aspect that's like, does it hit this certain vibe? Like, does it resonate with this certain feeling? And then I hope to achieve this ability. I hope that I'm doing this. I don't know. We're all kind of questioning ourselves all the time. I know I do. But I hope that when I post something that's like bright, colorful, existential surrealism, and then I post something else that's like black and white, ripped, torn paper, broken glass collage, they look like they're from the same person. That's what I want to achieve, not because I want things to look different, but I want them to be the same, even though they are different. And that's because I'm the common denominator, And so I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's the way that kind of distinguishes what it is that makes the artist, like what puts what piece of the artist into the work itself,
So yeah. So now I'm starting to understand where your meaning of mastery would come from. It feels like, hearing you talk, it feels like what you're saying is you've perfected a certain language and a certain process which executes perfectly, that nobody else could maybe reproduce visually, but not be a one-of-one exact Blac piece, because it's a language maybe only you understand and only you can produce. So that's where your artistic form comes from.
I think so. I think there's this level of, as I said, I think there's like energy there, but then I also think there's like logic there. Like on the energy side, it's like what feels right, but then on the logic side, it's like what checks off these boxes that I'm trying to do in the first place, and if it doesn't check off, like there's so many times where it's like something looks, super dope, but it's like, that doesn't really, it doesn't check off any of these boxes. And like, maybe every now and then I'll just like post something or whatever just to kind of fuck around, but it's not like it's like a part of like the core portfolio of things, and never will be, and I think that's tough. It's really tough because I know a lot of artists go through this process where it's like, you want to, and I think it's necessary to venture out, and look at other things and create new things and do something completely different. I think that's necessary. I think that's something that you have to like find the things that are beyond the limits to understand what the limit is, in the sense of like by limit, I mean like the bucket of your total portfolio of work. Like how does that fit in there? You have to have walls somewhere. You have to, even if you're breaking walls all the time, like there has to be some, and in order to have this kind of through line through everything. So I think that everyone ends up having their own process at the end of the day. I think people who are really serious about what they're doing have their own process. Let me put it that way.
Right.
While everyone, I think there's like a level of playing around, and then it gets exploratory, but then at some point you got to lock it down and you got to own it. Like that's just, it has to be that way. Otherwise you'll be known for nothing. And I don't think that there's like a lot of purpose behind that, like when you lock it down and you put a lot of effort into solidifying the philosophy behind it or the purpose behind it, or even if it's like, it doesn't have to be super serious work, but if you're serious about the work, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's amazing hearing you talk. You remind me of the story of Francis Bacon, who started out copying Picasso and then realized that he had to pivot in order to be taken seriously as an artist. So that's when he started developing his signature style, and that's when he started, getting famous. So it's really interesting what you're saying. Yeah, it feels like every artist that's serious has to find his own language and his own process. Yeah, and
it's true, and you have to own that. Like I think that's a good thing. I think you can learn from other people and be inspired by other people. I think you have to be too, because working in a silo is not. I don't think that's very conducive to having like a good worldview, if you will, like on the work, not like politically or socially or anything, but I mean like just artistically, like what other people are doing. I think it's good to know that. I think it's, every now and then I'll come across a new artist to me on Twitter and I'm like, holy shit, like how did I not know about this person? This is amazing. And then it's really inspiring. And like it looks nothing like anything that I'm doing, but it's inspiring, and I think that's a good thing,
Yeah, it gives you ideas. It feeds into your ideas as well. And you need that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I secretly call you the modern day Dali, man, because you've got this modern day, I call it surrealism, and especially a psychedelic look to your art. So why is that? Why is so psychedelic?
It's funny. This guy Jared, who works with Maker's Place, I think it's like JRD Scott is his handle. He's awesome. If you guys don't know him, you should check him out. But he constantly refers to me as Goth Dolly.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
It's pretty funny. No, but the very first time I ever saw Dolly's work, I was like 14, and I saw the Dolly Museum in Tampa, in Florida, and it was something really inspirational for me. And I've always enjoyed surrealism. It's funny because like before working with AI, the thing that I worked on the most in terms of stylistically was abstract expressionism, oil paintings, as well as photography. And like I used to be a professional photographer for a while, and then I've done abstract expressionist oil paintings forever. And I think that there's a lot of that in the work that I do, but then a lot of it comes out in this like psychedelic surrealism. I like to call it existential surrealism, as I sort of just made that up one day. But to me, it's like I try to pull in a lot of the kind of ultra consciousness experiences that I've had in my journey of, I don't know, intended self-awakening, if you will. And so I try to translate some of that into the works while also making them kind of shocking in a way. I try, especially with that type of work, the larger collection that I've been working on since November is called Altered States, and none of it's minted yet. It's probably going to be a larger drop here at some point. And that work is really based off of a short series I did in late 22, early 23 called Explorations of Ultra Consciousness. And that was sort of the thing that kind of, as far as psychedelic work, the first, part of that I really put out. But this has been like a reoccurring theme in a lot of the work that I've done here. When I first started, before I even had Twitter, the prompts and things I was working with my own AI was based on the same ideas, was the ideas of like, how can I make this how can I use this technology to express what I can express in words, but it take that and make it into a visual standpoint. These things that I've experienced, a lot of the prompts that I use are like literal, like I write out things that I've experienced or ideas that I've experienced in different states of consciousness. And then that becomes the prompt. And then I tweak and compose and work on that over a long period of time. But a lot of the prompts, even the stuff that I put out right now for altered states, there's sections of the prompts I use for those that I was using in my own AI before I ever even had Twitter.
Wow.
So like these are ideas I've been working on for a long time. And so it's not something, even though they look different, what's really different is the models and the tools is what changes. And I'm obviously tweaking and modifying the things over time, but the core of it, the idea of it is still the same ideas. And there's a lot of them. There's not just one. And so it's based off of different experiences that I've had with out of body experiences, sensory deprivation, astral projection. I wouldn't really say lucid dreaming, but that's probably mixed into some of the experiences that I have in my prompts. Different types of psychedelics, transcendentalism, Vedic and Zen, Buddhist practices. These things that I did in my mid to late 20s and early 30s, and still kind of tap into every now and then now. And I've always had a hard time trying to, like, if you ever had like a really trippy psychedelic experience and you go try to tell a friend about it, they're like, oh, cool, man. Like cool story, bro. Like, I'm glad that happened for you. But they can't like relate to it because it didn't happen to them.
Right.
And so a lot of things that I've experienced, I feel like that's the case. And so I just wanted to see, when I first started working with AI, as I was saying, I just wanted to see what it would do with some of the ideas that I can't really show someone because they didn't have it. So how can I make that happen? And even though a lot of what I put out isn't a literal representation of an experience, it's much more of a conceptual nod towards it. And so I think it gives the same kind of feeling. And that's why, like, I like the idea of existentialism, where you're kind of like breaking the bounds of your reality in an uncomfortable way, shedding identity, ego death, like those kinds of ideas, but it's very surreal. And there's a part of it that looks real. There's a part of it that's obviously not real. And it's sort of floating somewhere in between. That's the check. That's the box I'm trying to check off, when I put this stuff out.
Man, Blac, you're killing it with the answers, man. Holy shit. Absolutely killing it. I love it, man. Yo, have you ever taken some mushrooms and then typed out a prompt just to see what happens?
My brain is sort of permanently in that state of mind. You're asking, you're like, oh man, what are your answers? Well, that's because I'm constantly in the weird mindset. No, I microdose mushrooms. I'd say probably once a month I'll microdose mushrooms or other things. And so, yeah, that's definitely happened. I wouldn't say that it's quite different from from just prompting sober, if you will. But I think that at least now at this point in this kind of path of things, a lot of what I'm working on are just things that I have going on. So like, it's not as exploratory, I guess, because I said I've been working on this like altered states since November, and I've been doing stuff like it for a long time. So it's not something that is like super brand new. Everything is like very, very, very refined over time. And so I'm still working within this kind of like funnel of ideas rather than this kind of like super open-minded world of ideas, especially with wrapping things under the umbrella of Syncretica, and kind of putting things into this framework. Like everything kind of has its place. And if it is something new and exploratory and I like it, I want to find its place. It's something I want to like put into that box, and I figure out a way to branch lines from one thing to another to put it together. And so then it's like, well, if I start doing something crazy and out of the box or exploratory, like recently I opened up a collection called Syncretica Studies, and they're basically just, they're works in progress, concepts, ideas, mock-ups, things that I've done while working on the broader work of Syncretica, or like I'm gonna mint something later today, probably if gas goes down, that's going to be representative of a show that I'm doing soon. That it won't be a final piece, but it's definitely like a milestone piece on the way to that piece. And I think that stuff is important to timestamp and to mint and to put out there. But then I'm putting it into the ecosystem of things that I'm doing, so everything kind of has its place. So when I am prompting and kind of going back to the drawing board for something new, it's rarely brand new. It's usually somehow put into the bucket of things that I'm doing. So regardless of what state of mind I'm in, I'm usually kind of focused with what I'm putting out there.
Oh yeah, man. I'm glad you brought this up. The age of Syncretica. Like, could you tell us a bit more for people who don't know about it? I love this storytelling aspect that you put behind it and all the work you put out.
For sure. So the age of Syncretica itself, so that's a little bit separate from other things, but the age of Syncretica is it's a branch from Strange History. It's a story that's minted on Super Rare, and it's a what if alternate timeline to if this idea that I've been building called Syncretica, which I can kind of dive into in a moment, if that was real. And so it kind of branches from Strange History, and it ends up kind of tying in previous series that I've had into kind of future series that I'm going to do, and that sort of thing. It's a very like a cinematic kind of storytelling, film-like kind of idea that starts with JFK in the 60s. And I even have some like prequel type branch off things from there too, that goes back to like the 1700s or so. And so while working on this idea, let me kind of roll it back. Like in the beginning of last year, I started working with a framework for my art to be able to put out different types of series and different looks of things and different visual aesthetics, and doing things for different shows and exhibitions and stuff, but also trying to keep it within one umbrella of things. Excuse me. So I tried to create a new philosophy, a framework for art, a religion, and it's called Syncretica. And so there's 11 different concepts within it, 11 different testaments, if you will. When I started to work on this idea for Strange History, for the age of Syncretica, and kind of basing this alternative reality on the idea of Syncretica, I came to the conclusion that I had to create Syncretica in order to do that accurately. So I kind of didn't want to create an alternative reality in a world where as if a belief system was real without having the entire belief system done. And so I ended up basically launching a journey, a really crazy, fucking insane journey of writing this entire new religion, philosophy, belief system, framework for art, whatever you want to call it, up to you really as the viewer and person to experience it. And it's been crazy. So I've written, I have two full drafts of the first two testaments done. I'm about 85%, 90% done with the third testament, and each one sort of is based on a certain philosophy of ideas based on some of the things I just talked about. Astral projection, the occult ideologies, rites of passage, psychedelic experiences, technological singularity, naturalism, different ideas like that. And all 11 of them fit within this umbrella of Syncretica. And as of right now, I have a little over 200,000 words written. And that's just the first like 2 3/4. I have like 8 more to go. And when it's finished, I believe it may end up being probably anywhere between 850,000 to 900,000 words, almost 1 million words perhaps. And it could potentially become the largest modern day religious document in the world. And so that's what it is. That's this absolute insane project that I put onto my shoulders that I'm working on all the time. But almost all of my work that I put out branches from ideas within that, not just the Age of Syncretica, but everything. And that was the purpose behind it. So like my Penumbra series, The very first testament is called Penumbra, and it's based on the entire story of my Penumbra series. The second one is Vicium, which gives throwbacks and nods to a show that I did in October called Horrorwood with some people from Strange History. And it even it pulls on some of the ideas that we built out for that, and it gives a nod to the Age of Syncretica. And what would the question is what would inspire someone in this alternative reality that I've built with Strange History? What would be in the book that would inspire them? And then I write that in. What is the answer to the meaning of multiple dimensional realities? I try to answer that. I'm trying to create a framework for understanding the world around us and the reality that we all exist in, because I don't think that exists. I don't think that any classic religion actually gives an answer to things like multiple dimensional personas and identities. I don't think that anything really touches on the idea of exiting your body and experiencing the ethereal world. I don't think anything touches on hallucinating while depriving yourself of your senses. I don't think anything touches on that stuff. And so to me, I want to try to create an answer for those things. But this is such a huge rabbit hole of things. It's hard for me to talk about. It's hard for me to talk about it because I could talk about 50 things and it's way too complex. I feel like that's the negative of it. It's very complex. It's a hard thing to absorb. I kind of recognize that. I also like that a little bit, to be honest. The artist in me is like, fuck it, I don't care. I mean, make the most complex thing I possibly can. And if no one follows it, then that's on me. But I'm just trying to answer something for myself while creating art, and having a reason behind it. And so that's it.
It sounds really amazing. I'm really excited to see where you take this visually, especially where AI is going with video, because I'm excited to read some of your chapters. But sometimes I wonder, are you worried about the generation of today that has such a short attention span? You know what I'm saying? Are you worried that kids today won't have the patience to read through all that?
I'm not worried. I know that that's true. It's not. I have no expectations for anyone to read it. I'll just put that out there right now. It would be great, but I don't really. This is an interesting note because I feel like this is what comes up every time I talk about this. It's like, well, it's in a million. It can put you up almost like in a 1,000,000-word document. Am I going to read it? It's sort of it's a hard thing to do. I think that, to me, it's not really about that. I don't have. Let me put it this way. I look at it as like pulling a block out of a quarry, and then everything else that I'm doing is like chiseling that down, taking sections of it, polishing it. Like to me, it's just, I can't really, I feel like I'm on hold almost until I write it. I feel like anything else that I do, I talked to a curator in the trad art space a couple of weeks back, and we were talking about like physical installations, and they're like, could you do something? I'm like, yeah, I could. I have several ideas for something like this, but it would branch back to experiencing ideas from Syncretica. Well, what is that? Well, it's this massive, it's like I need like a reference point. If I'm making something for a piece for a show and I want to put text in it, I'm going to Testament number 2, chapter 12, verse 16, and I'm pulling that from that. I'm using it for things. I'm using it as ammunition. It's fodder for my work, And so as far as consumability, I know that's a huge challenge, and people don't read like a 10-word tweet, much less like a 1,000,000-word document. So I don't have any expectation of that, but I'm considering different ways of creating paths for people to consume it. So like, for example, last Thursday, some people joined me to do a space, and I read an entire chapter from Vicium. I read out chapter 17 and kind of talked about the project and read it out as if it was a live audiobook reading or something. And so I like that idea. I like the idea of recording maybe like weekly podcasts where every week I'm reading out a chapter or something. I've also, one idea that I have that I'm probably end up going to do is that every single testament is based on, there's like a single focal point character. And I'm considering taking each testament when they're done and edited and creating a full data set in an LLM and creating like an interactive, chat AI, custom GPT for every single testament, and have them all in one place and allow people to go speak to the entities and characters from these stories and gain wisdom from those conversations instead of having to read the entire thing. But I have to have the entire thing first. So you see what I'm saying. Everything, like anything that I do has to be done off of this thing that I build out. And that even goes back to like the Aegis Syncretica for Strange History. It's like I'm at a point where like I have 6 pieces minted for that. They're very like, I would say, prestigious kind of pieces in my body of work. I'm about to have 3 more coming out here soon. And I'm making sure that I'm referencing things that I'm writing. So I have to write it first to know that I'm referencing things, even if they're just breadcrumbs. So when someone looks back at my body of work 3, 4, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I want them to be able to look at one piece and find a breadcrumb, and it leads them on this fucking journey of like, holy shit, this entire thing, all of this is connected to one another. Like that's sort of like, I want it to be crazy. And that's sort of where I like that idea. And I like other things like that, like different shows and books and things like this that kind of tie into other things. Like I like that idea. And so I want my work to do that as well, but I have to have that core thing done first. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
That makes so much sense. And a perfect example for me personally is Dune. Before the movies or whatever, before I had any interest in reading the books or whatever, I had to see some kind of a simplification of the story before it caught my attention. So what you're saying makes perfect sense. I think you have some super potential with this, because once you give people a little taste of it, like make it easy for them to digest. Like audiobooks is fucking fantastic, and reading it out loud is even better, because once you hook him, like just like me with Dune, I was like, okay, this is really fucking badass. What is behind all this? And then you discover that there's like 6, 7 other books. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And the way you're doing it is absolutely perfect. And I think it has some major potential once you create that community, that the people that are hungry to learn about the lore behind all this story is fucking fantastic. And I can't wait to see what you do with it, man.
I appreciate that, man. That's one of the reasons why, like, I'm trying to create, instead of it being like one thing, I look at it also like with like religion, where it's like a lot of religions, and maybe this is just our human perception, but it's like you have to believe in one thing. It's like, oh, well, if you're this, then you can't be that. If you're Christian, you can't be Muslim. If you're, it's like that. It's like this weird kind of like, I don't like that, and I've never liked that. And so to me, it's like, if I were to create a religion, I would want to create different ideas that allow people to associate themselves with different parts of it. It's like, well, maybe you're into the occult, there's a place for you here. Maybe you're into psychedelics and astral projection or whatever. There's a place for you here. You don't have to like abide by everything. It's like 11 different entry points, and the idea behind it, really, when it comes to like the philosophy behind it, it's a matter of like trying to answer questions that I have about the world and reality around us. And then, also trying to solve, again, it goes back to problem solving, right? It's like solving the problem of, if I look at my Strange History series, it's like, well, if this was a world global religion, what would that have to be? Like, what would, like, if you ask yourself this, like, just outside of this conversation, just ask yourself, like, right now in 2024, or even look at it as like 2050, like, look ahead. What would a global religion have to be? Like, what would a religion have to be, or philosophy or belief system or whatever you want to call it? What would it have to be for the majority of the planet to say, yes, that's me? I don't think that it's one singular answer. I think it's an answer with multiple answers. That's what I think. And so to me, it's like, I'm trying to answer that question too. It's like, well, how would something be able to virally go into the ecosystem of multiple languages, geographic locations, history, cultural references, like all these things? Like, how is that how is it something like, how can I create something that would hopefully maybe check off that box if it was this? Like, it's much more like a hypothetical question. And so that's what I'm trying to answer that as well. There's a lot of questions I'm trying to answer, quite frankly. It's fucking nuts, but I'm trying to figure it out and try to answer that as I go. So it's like, in one way, it's a very small, localized question of like, okay, strange history, aegis syncretica, worldwide religion, and a story. What does that have to be? But then the broader question is, well, what would it be? You know, in reality, what would it be? And because I'm making it, it's a very interesting art project, you know, because it's like, I'm not really making it with the idea of consumption. I'm making it with the idea of belief. Like, people who say they're Christians, I doubt the majority of them have read every single word of the Old and New Testament. I highly doubt that, you know? And so it's like, it doesn't have to be something that everyone reads. It doesn't have to be something that you read entirely. Maybe you just read one thing out of the 11 and you're like, holy shit, this is dope. I'm all about Visium. I love that. I identify with that idea, you know? And so that to me is really the goal. It's like, give people multiple ways to come into it. And then, as you were saying about like the different projects and things, it's like every series of work that I put out, like visually, ties back into it too. So someone doesn't have to even know what Syncretica is at all in order to like, you know, a GM post that I put out. But guess what? It branches back into it. Nothing doesn't at this point that I put out. And that's the reason why, you know, and I don't care. Like, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't mean to me that someone has to know that in order to appreciate what's there, or to like it, or to collect it, or to come talk to me about it. But it is there. It's built into it. And maybe I think that there's like energy transference that happens, you know, because I'm putting that energy into it. I think that is felt when you see it, even if you don't know what it is.
So when you're going into this, do you keep in the back of your mind the idea that it could turn into some kind of cult? Some kind of like extremist religion?
You know, I guess so. I wouldn't say extremist. I mean, a cult is, I mean, I would say anyone sitting here on this space or in Web3 is in a cult.
Yeah, exactly. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Question the narrative, you know, it's like, you know, I like the idea of memeing a cult into existence. I think that's hilarious. And the artist in me, the kind of like cosmic anarchist in me, I like the idea of just like being like, yeah, fuck it, let's do that. But I don't really, I guess in a way, like, I could meme that, but I don't really like mean it, if that makes sense. Like, I wouldn't really consider myself that, but I kind of like that. So I don't know. It's a weird one. I will say though that a couple of months ago when I was talking about this, I had someone say like, you know, if this actually gains any traction, you realize that a lot of people are going to be upset because it's going to be like heresy. You know, like, people will not be happy about something like this. And I had not considered something like that, you know, and they specifically reference like, you know, hardcore Christians or whatever, which I would think would probably apply to anybody that is like a hardcore believer in something, that they would see it as like blasphemous. And I was like, well, I mean, I would think that those people would think how I look at the world as blasphemous already. So I don't really know if that really bothers me, but it's something that I will say I've taken into consideration, and I never had the intention of offending someone or belittling an idea of anything else, or even like making a parody of, like, people have asked me if this is like a parody of a specific religion or something. And it's not. It's me trying to answer a question that I have based on my own experiences. At the very core of it, outside of all the art stuff, and I can connect everything to everything and all this other shit, at the very core of it, it's really about trying to put a framework around my own way that I look at things. And I just don't think that there's anything, like, I'm not an atheist, and I wouldn't even say I'm agnostic, but I don't adhere to any religion because none of them answer the question for me. They just don't answer the question for me. And I think that it's like, that's really what I'm trying to do is I just want to answer a question. And if it answers a question that other people have, great. If it's just an art project, great. If it's something that allows me to create visual pieces or installations or do talks on or whatever, and it never takes off as like a belief, or no one buys the books or whatever, I don't really care about any of that. Like, none of that really means anything to me. It's much more of a matter of it's art for art's sake. It's philosophy for philosophy's sake. And I don't really, the commercialization aspect of it, there's a lot of potentials. There's a lot of ways it could grow or die or whatever, but I don't really, to me, I'm just doing it and I don't really care. I don't really care about the result. I just want to get it done and answer the question for myself. That's the result that I want. Anything else that happens after that is just progress, I feel
So
like.
you keep saying there's a question. What's the question? Do you know what it is? The question you're trying to answer through all this?
Yeah, the question is, what is this human experience? It's the universal question, or at least the humanity universal question. Like, what is this? You know, it's I can tell you what I don't think it's, you know, a big white man with a white beard hiding in the sky waiting for us at pearly gates. I can tell you, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's like, you know, a 12-armed Buddhist god floating on chariots of light. I don't think it's you know, I don't think it's like Sumerians or people from Nibiru coming from, I don't think it's I mean, pick anything. I think that I think the biggest mistake that we've made as humanity is associating myth with reality. And I think that's a huge problem because we end up labeling things as if they're real, but they're ideas. So it's like, to me, like Jesus Christ is an idea. Like, I think that's an idea, you know? I think that's a label, not a name. And I think if people looked at it as a label, not a name or historical fact, there may be more to glean from that. There may be more people who would appreciate the ideas of it. And Buddha, the same thing, right? Like, so it's like, it's a weird thing. So for example, in anything that I'm writing with Syncretica, I'm not using any names. They're all labels. You know, Penumbra, the main character, isn't named like John Smith. He's named the Traveler. It's like a label. I don't ever want someone to read and be like, oh, this is real. Like 100 years from now, if this, you know, someone digs this up out of a post-apocalypse, you know, dirt or something, and there's a fucking leather-bound book, and they're like, oh, I found a book to help guide us on our way to the future. I don't want them to be like, oh, this person was real. Like, to me, it's like, this is an idea, and I always want it to feel like an idea. So it's like, how can I use this idea to answer questions of what this experience is? And I think that's the question, you know.
Yeah, that was one hell of a rabbit hole. I enjoy that one deeply. That you really, man, you got me thinking about some really deep shit out here, man. Good fucking answer. Bravo, man. Wow, that was deep. I wasn't expecting that answer, man. Wow, bravo. So, leaving that part, you know, in Web3, it's no secret. I heard you talk about it a lot, and I always found it really interesting what you had to say. That you felt like collectors are more worried about trade and profit rather than the actual art. So, in your opinion, how should artists navigate this complex and difficult environment?
I think just accepting that is probably step one. I almost want to say as like denial is the biggest problem. Like, I think like, I just feel like people don't, a lot of people, especially when you're new in this space, I'm not saying this as like a broad stroke, everyone feels this way, but I think as you come into this space, it's like, it depends on where you're coming in from too. It's a variable answer, I guess, but it's like, I feel like people tend to bucket, you know, certain types of people. It's almost like a form of prejudice in a way I look at it. Where it's like collectors are collectors. Like, everyone who's a collector is a collector, and they're in this bucket with a big fucking sticker that says collector on it. And everyone has to think that way. And oh, if you're an artist, guess what? You're in this bucket over here, and you have to think this way, and you have to post this way, and you're not allowed to say this, and you can't put this price up, and you can't talk. Like, there's all these rules for whatever fucking reason that everyone throws out there. And there are no rules. This is the Wild West. Like, Web3 is the Wild West. So there are no rules. You know, it just is. There's best practices, maybe. There's genuine ways to operate, maybe. But collectors are people who are out there. Let me be very specific. I don't want to use the same bucket. People that are not artists, that are here to collect work specifically with the purpose of finding or discovering a blue chip artist, for example, or investing in an artist, and because they believe that the artist has a future and the price will go up of what they're investing in. That's a different person. That's a different, when I, coming from marketing and, advertising and stuff like this, that's what we call a buyer persona. So that to me is a different buyer persona than someone who is scrolling through their feed and go, oh shit, that's dope. I'm just going to buy that. That's a completely different buyer persona. And I think that a lot of people look at that second one and they assume all people who are collecting are that second buyer persona. And that's just not true. When I'm in groups of people that are, there's a specific Discord that I'm in that has a lot of collectors in it. And that doesn't help me with sales, by the way, just to throw that out there, ironically enough. But it's very, very interesting to just see the daily conversations, because it's about floor price. It's about volume. It's about engagement. It's about, 24-hour price movements of this piece versus that piece. And a lot of them are looking at it like that. And again, that's not everyone who's collecting, but that's a very specific buyer persona. And I think that artists have this weird, or at least artists in the bucket of artists, and the way that artists should or shouldn't think according to, people out on the timeline, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think that a lot of times people look at it and go oh, well, they shouldn't be speculating on the work, or they should buy it if they really like the work. And that kind of stuff. I put so much time into this thing, so they should collect my stuff, not the stuff of someone else. You don't have, no one fucking owes you anything, for starters. And secondly, you have no idea why someone would invest in something. Think about it like a stock. Think about it like if I wanted to invest into Amazon in 2001, I would look at the fundamentals. I would look at the technical. It's fundamental and technical trading is what it is. And they're looking at the ideas of whether or not they want to invest in someone, especially right now with the way that the prophesized bull market will be coming at any moment. And, people are looking at it and saying, who do I want to, what horse am I going to put my money on? The people who are out there wanting to invest in art, not collect art, but invest in it for a return. Those are the people with liquidity. You can't ignore that. I also think that it doesn't mean that you have to attract the flipper degen crowd either, because that's a slightly different crowd. That's more gambling than it is investing. And I think all forms of investing are a form of gambling one way or the other, but it's a matter of whether or not they're oh, I'm going to get in this thing here, I'm going to flip it for here. That's a completely different mindset than someone, man, this artist, they're serious, they're here all the time, their work is incredible, I see where they're going. I'm picking up one of those because I love the piece, and I also think they have a future here. And I know that if I get 2 or 3 of their pieces, 2 or 3 years from now, it's going to be worth more. And I'm holding this one because that's my favorite, but I'm selling these other 2 at the moment. If I go from 1 ETH to 10 ETH on this, if I can sell it to 10 ETH, I'm going to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are the collectors that that right there is the buyer persona that I want. That's the collector persona that I want. But you also have to admit that the flipper degen side of things, those people that are rushing in right now, especially because of shitcoin season starting back up again, you're going to see people that are going to create liquidity for themselves, and they're going to want to just flip work. And you can't deny that in the space. I think being aware of it, and going back to my original point, being aware of it and accepting that is step number 1, and it's not all about this flowery, rainbows and unicorn collector comes down from the mountain and plucks me up from the fields. And it's not like that. Maybe that's happened for a few people. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen. That happened in 2021, but I don't think that's not happening all the time now. And I don't think that that's really to me personally, I would rather not blow up like that. I would rather not someone come in and pluck me up, because I don't need saving. I don't want that. And I don't want to be propped up by someone who I owe something to for a long period of time either, or feel like I got to kiss the ring or something, because that's not who I am. So as an artist, I want people to, if they want to come collect the work, I want them to collect the work because they like it, they believe in the work, they believe in what I'm doing, and they think that if they can make a profit off of it in a year or so because they believe that I'm going to still be here, then good for them. Like that's good. That's good for me too. I don't see the reason why artists get so upset about people flipping their work. I think that like the DJ and flipper crowd and these huge drops and stuff, I think that is a problem. And I'm aware of that. I'm trying not to buy into that when it comes to this larger collection I'm putting out. But I want to kind of dip into that pool a little bit too, because again, they have liquidity. It's a balance. But I also think like having the right collectors and being in the right place and, you know, not jumping around all the time and, you know, focusing the work on one chain or two chains, one or two different platforms and keeping it tight. I think that's the way you do that. That's how you curate the collectors that you have, and people that believe in the work, you know? And so I just think it's good to be aware of that stuff, and it's not good or bad. One's not right or wrong. And some artists play into that. They want to go into that like flipper zone, the place where people can go in and buy their shit up and flip it the next day or whatever. That's great. Like good for them. I want everyone to win in the way that they want to win. There's too many people out there putting rules out about who should do what and what they can't do. Like fuck all that. I think people should do the things that resonate with them, but just be aware that it resonates with you, and don't go jump towards the, you know, follow the shiniest object in the room. And because what ends up happening is I think people get too dispersed and they're too spread out and they can't get too focused on one thing. They become just fractionated. And I don't think that carries foundational strength for the future. And so I think that's the reason why being focused in a couple things is better than having your toe in 100 things. It's like that in everything. It's not just this world. It's like that with everything. You can't put chips on every single number on a roulette table. Like you gotta pick your zone, you know, and you gotta play that zone, and that's just how it is. So you can pick any zone you want, but you pick one, pick two, pick three. Don't pick 100. You know, I think that's the thing to keep in mind, and just accept like what it is you're going after. Like I know the type of collectors I want to go for, and so therefore I'm going in that direction. If you want to have huge drops and have flippers come in and everything else, then make work for that, do the thing for that, and do you. You know, at the end of the day, that's what I think it's about. From collecting or creating, just do the thing that you want to do, own it, you know, be aware of it, and just do that.
Well, man, well said. And I think one of the toughest challenges artists have is mixing emotions and business. You know what I'm saying? We're so fucking emotional. You know, like the sky is constantly falling on our heads. And how do you feel like sometimes you have to handle your emotions, or do you feel like you're already over that? You know exactly what you're doing. You already have the business mindset necessary.
I definitely have issues with emotions in this space, and it's not because of my art. It's because of just the environment. I think it's a very toxic environment at times, and I think you have to really filter what you allow your mind to see. You know, you read something and your brain can't really, like, you may know logically, like, you know, if I read XYZ person's tweet, I know that it's not mine, and I know it's not my thought, but I'm embedding that thought into my brain. And then that over time ends up impacting the way that you feel about your own reality. So if you're going through the timeline and all you see is all this negative shit, you're going to feel negative. Like it's fucking science at that point. There's no way around that. And so to me, it's like, you have to be able to navigate that for your own mental health. And I think there are people who like being negative. Like there are people that like that, and you know, that's on them. Again, it's like, do you? But to me, I don't. I'm affected by certain things more so than other things, and I don't really want to be affected by those things. I've been very, very secure in my like emotional identity for a long time, and I've gone through a lot to get to that point. And this space has broken some of those things for me, and I don't like that. And so I also don't like, when it comes to anything in the world, I don't like feeling like something controls me. You know, I don't like feeling like something possesses me. I don't like that. Maybe that's like the Taurus in me or the asshole in me or something. I don't know. I don't like that. I don't like something, you know, if ever in the past, like if I was drinking daily or something, and one day I'm like, you know what? I think I feel like I have to drink. So fuck that. I'm not going to anymore. Like things like that. Like that's sort of how I am. I'm very like cold turkey with things. And so it's like that with this space too, where it's like, if I feel like, oh man, I got to check my notifications to feel better, then I will turn my fucking phone off and leave it in another room in the house. I just don't like that. I don't do that. And so I have to, for me personally, and again, like everyone do the thing they want to do, but I don't put myself in a place where I'm allowing the things that I don't want to see to enter my awareness. And that's just my own, like, I have to do that. And it's very easy to burn out here. It's very easy to become like addicted, chemically addicted, I think, to social media. Before being on Twitter, even though I worked in marketing and did a lot of brand stuff for clients and things like this, I did not have social media. I haven't been on social media since like 2014 until I opened up a Twitter account to do this. And it's because I don't like social media. I think it's a net negative in a lot of ways for the human condition. And I don't like what it's done to me either. And I'm very much aware of it. In fact, I'm probably too much aware of it. And that's why it affects me. So yeah, I definitely have emotional struggles, but I'm trying to, and I think successfully so, negate and navigate. So that's what I'm doing. That involves taking breaks. It involves, quite frankly, scheduling posts out a week or so in advance. And then only having like scheduled times to engage and to check messages and things like this. And then go work on art, do the shit that you like to do, like create, branch out. Like, I think that's more important than anything else. And whatever the distractive meta of the day is, 1 ETH equals 1 ETH or whatever it may be. So-and-so used AI in their piece. Like, who gives a fuck? I don't care. Like, let them do what they're going to. And it doesn't mean that someone doing something that's wrong is right. It just means I didn't do it. So why should I subject myself to it? And I don't really, there's too many people. I'm not trying to police people. I don't care. Like, if they're not coming to do something negative towards me or doing me wrong, I don't care, because I'm not doing other people wrong. So I'm just handling my own shit. And I have my own demons that I deal with all the time. So, I mean, look at my art. It's not bright rainbows. So like, I have my own shit that I deal with and things that I have internally. And I don't need, quite frankly, maybe this is, a hot take, but I don't need other people's shit on top of my own shit. So I'll put it like that, as blunt as possible.
And I feel I need to thank you, first of all, because you said something really deep when we were talking in the incubator. Usually when I look at my Twitter, I usually don't get, as much engagement. And I used to feel really fucking bad about it. And it used to fuck with my mental health a lot. And I think that's one of the toughest parts about being in Web3 is this whole, you have to be on Twitter 24/7. You have to be the hottest thing popping at the moment. But you said something that always stuck with me. You said, it's not because you get 800, 1,000 likes that it means anything, and that it rarely equates to sales. And that I had to say thank you, man, because it helps remind everybody that, at the end of the day, the likes is great, the dopamine is awesome, but it's the art that matters, right?
Yeah, it's a balance, and I think it's easy to, like, when you don't have a lot of engagement, it's easy to see someone else with a lot of engagement and be like, fuck, like, I think that's like, it's an easy, like, I wouldn't even say it's easy. I would say it's natural. Like, that's a natural feeling. That's why it's so negative. And it's like, I don't know. It sucks because it's like everyone here starts at zero, and you step in and you look at other people with 50,000 or something. And you're like, holy shit! Like, or even people with 5,000. You got 100 followers, and you look at someone with 5,000. You think that's like monumental. But guess what? Like, I'm about to cross 30,000, and I look at people with 100,000 as monumental. When I had 100, I look at people at 1,000 as monumental. It's you're always going to be looking up because you're growing. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, it doesn't equate to sales. There are certain people, there's certain accounts, I should say. I don't think it's the people that dictate this or not, but there's certain accounts that they'll get tens of thousands of likes or thousands of likes or whatever, and get like 5 comments or something. That's like a very specific, like, algorithmic delivery signal, if you will. Like, you can see how certain people get that type of like delivery with the algorithm. They're not out making sales. It doesn't really matter. I have some things that Like my pin post, for example, my penumbra 6 piece, I have like 800 likes. There's like tens of thousands of views or whatever it is. I don't have a sale on that. It doesn't mean that. And I think there's a balance. It doesn't mean that zero engagement's fine either, but it just means that it really doesn't matter. Like I guess, especially if you go look at artists who were here in like, 2019, 2020, 2021, those with like 50, 70, 100,000 followers or something, the majority of those people are not here anymore. I mean, the followers are not here anymore. Not that they got bot follows, but they just had people that followed them during that time, especially the bull run, and they're not here anymore. And so some artists who were really famous or blue chip or had huge sales and continue to have huge sales with big collectors, they get like 20 likes on something. That's the inverse, right? Because you look at their follower count and it's not the same. So you can't, it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. It just means that it shouldn't matter as much as maybe we try to feel like it matters. I think that's a bit of like self-curation. I'm trying to like, okay, well, whatever, if you're here every day, like not everyone sees every tweet anyways. I think when we put a lot of pressure onto one thing we go to put out, it feels like a lot of weight or a lot of value on that one post. Like, oh man, I got this drop. I got to put this thing out and, oh, it got 20 likes in 10 hours, holy shit, like no one cares, but it's still out there. You just got to keep talking about it and you just got to keep posting stuff about it and it will hit certain people. I think that's the other thing to consider too, is like the work that you put out, the way that you talk about it, it attracts certain people and it doesn't attract everybody. It attracts certain people and that's something to be embraced, I think. And I think a lot of times we tend to, oh, you want this one collector to come in and whatever, but maybe they don't like that type of work. Like, do you really want someone to come collect something just to collect it? Or do you want them to do it because they like it? I put out weird, surrealist, psychedelia, dark art shit. And I don't expect someone who likes like Grant Yoon's work to come in and pick it up because that's not their vibe. Like, that's okay. Like I shouldn't want that really. I should want someone who wants the work. Like maybe, it's going to attract someone who is really into that style or loves that idea or whatever. And that's not it. I recognize and accept that the stuff that I put out is not for everyone. Like, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have mass appeal. I'm not putting out like meme art or things that, I'm not doing stuff that I'm trying to attract certain people. And that's okay when people are. I think like, again, it's what you want to do. But for me personally, I'm not doing that. So I can't expect the same result, and that's okay. Like, it's okay.
Woof. Man, Black taking us to church, man. That was amazing, man. Man, you always...
This is a good time to do a space for me, man, because I got like 6 shots of espresso rolling through my fucking veins, man. I could do this.
I was like,
all
I gotta
day
get him on his coffee time, man. When he's got that energy going, man.
Yeah, dude. Anything before 10 o'clock is no good. But right now is like my prime talking. I can preach for hours.
How do you feel about the Twitter open calls? Do you think they're worth something? And they're like retweet and tag and all this monarchy and like. Do you think they're worth it, in your opinion?
I think at different stages they are. At your early stages they are, because you gotta hustle, you gotta grind, you gotta get out there and put your shit out, like one way or the other. And you win shows like that and you get into shows like that, and that helps prop you up. Like that gives you audience, that gives you some street cred around here. I think that's important. But you get to a certain point and it's too much. Like you can't what I realized close to 2020, at the end of 2023, like around the fall or so, was that I looked back at 2023 and I had this list of accomplishments that I feel like I'm really proud of. But then I look at it and I'm like, 9 out of 10 of those things had nothing to do with the stuff that I really want to do, or these bigger projects that I want to do, or this idea or this philosophy or whatever. Maybe they branch to it like I've been trying to do, as I was saying earlier, but it's not like my own series. It's not my own collection. And I think that you end up realizing at some point, like for me right now at this stage, like I just entered, like answer that specifically, I just entered Toko Deco's VR Apple Vision Pro open call on Saturday night. That's the first open call that I've put my work into for probably like 6 months, because that one was specifically, I was like, okay, I know I can do something for this. If I'm one of the 2 people selected, I know I'm getting into like Apple's universe of things. Like that'd be fucking dope. Like, absolutely. I'm all in. I end up creating this full VR piece and a full 360-degree thing, and probably put way too much work into it or whatever. But I knew I had a purpose with that, and so I don't think that I think you have to eventually get into a position where you're picking your shots, like, okay, that's going to hit with the thing that I want to do. And I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think it's about sales. I think it's about like the ideas, and like the idea behind the open call. If it's something that resonates with what you want to do, or if it's going to be exhibited in a place you want to be, or if it's going to have the audience that you want to have your work seen to, then if it checks some of those boxes, then the answer is yes. I think that's true regardless of what phase you're in. But I think the overall volume of them over time ends up being less and less, so you can focus on other stuff. And maybe that's detrimental for growth. I don't know. But just for me and my own purposes, I'm trying to only pick I'm trying to do 200-yard sniper shots on what it is I really want to get done. And I can't go in with a shotgun approach. But I think sometimes a shotgun approach earlier on is a good thing, because eventually you will get into something. If you haven't gotten into anything, you will get into something. The more that you do, the more tightly you hit on the brief, that sort of thing, that eventually you'll hit. And so I think that's a good thing to do when you're starting out.
So last question before we wrap this up. So Crypto Punk just sold for 4,500 ETH, which it equates to $16 million. What are your thoughts on all that, man?
I don't care, I guess.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all.
I don't know. I mean, I don't have $16 million to put onto a punk. And if I did, would I? I mean, I don't know. I just don't. This is a really weird space to be in. And I think a lot of times, well, I'll just answer it this way. When I've seen things like this happen in the past, there's a couple knee-jerk reactions. The artist's, general knee-jerk reaction as a whole is, oh my God, think of how much of my work they could have bought with that. Or, oh, they could have gone and gotten all that. It's like, okay, but they didn't. It doesn't, I don't know. I don't really look at it like that. So I think that that's a really negative mindset to be in, and it's cancerous. I think thinking like that's cancerous. So I think it's great, cool story. There are rich fucking people out buying stuff all the time. You know what I mean? Someone goes and buys a Ferrari from a place, but they didn't come buy my artwork. Should I be pissed at someone who's buying a Ferrari somewhere? I don't that's on them. I don't care. The other knee-jerk reaction is, holy shit, we're back. That's the other reaction. And I think the problem with that mindset is just because one person dropped that much into a single piece doesn't mean anything for the market at whole. Maybe there is. I mean, obviously, I think right now, especially we're seeing a lot of the shit coins and stuff and meme coins and stuff kind of blow up, and Bitcoin almost reaching an all-time high and Ethereum pumping. I think that is a good sign that we are accumulating more liquidity in the space. That's how I would define that. But I don't necessarily think one-off sales do that. And then thirdly, I think the real answer is that people have their own motives. People are going to everyone individually has their own motives. They're going to throw money into something that they want. People move money around all the time for different reasons. There's the meme of money laundering or whatever. Art has traditionally been a fantastic funnel for people to launder money through or put it into tax havens or whatever else. It's no different in this space. And to think that it is just not, I don't think it's an accurate viewpoint on things. It doesn't mean everything's like that, but people have their own motivations. So to me, I look at something like that as a distraction. I think I've been here long enough to have a mature, for me, my own purpose, my own philosophy, my own viewpoint, only speaking for myself. I look at that as a mature viewpoint of okay, cool, moving on. It doesn't affect me in the slightest. And I think that having a lot of discourse about it, saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, and spending your time on that instead of spending time on creating the next thing you're going to create, or spending time on your own mental health, or going out and taking a fucking walk down the street in the sun, I think it's just a waste of time. For me personally, that's how I look at it. And so I have, those are my thoughts of how I have this thoughts.
It's an interesting take, because you're talking to me, which is somebody that's on the other coin, which is, shit, somebody just bought something for $16 million. That means I have to work even harder, because maybe one day they'll buy, and I'm starting to realize, talking to you, there is a certain mental cancer in that, because instead of going out, instead of spending time with my family, I'm over here thinking, hey, that guy spent $16 million in Web3. I should work even harder. So that's an interesting point, man. Sometimes it's hard to realize that it's maybe not the best way to see things.
Well, working hard is a good thing, in my opinion. From my own perspective, I think working hard's good. But if you're working harder because of something else, because of what someone else did, that's a game you're never going to win. Because there will always be, no matter who you are in this space, there's always going to be someone who's working harder or has been more successful or has more followers or more likes or more whatever than you. And those people, if you were them, there are also other people who are doing more than them. So it's like there's a never ending trail. Even if you look at, say, like one of the number one artists in this space, I would say would probably be like Sam Spratt. Like look at like Monument Game, right? Like when he dropped, I was like, holy shit! Like what was it, like $1.8 million in total sales in like a week and a half or something. Obviously, took a long time to build that, but over like a week of like all the ticket sales and the game itself, whatever, it was like 1.8 million or whatever it was at the time. Which I'm sure now it's probably double that because of ETH price. But you look at that and it's like, even with that, you know, I'm not Sam, but I'm sure he knows more trad art people or people in digital media or people that are doing things in these huge brand deals or doing other things that are making $10 million in a week. You know what I mean? And like those people who are making $10 million in a week, they're looking at people that are making $100 million in a week. Like there will never be, there's never going to be, you're never going to, like you have to move with your own reason, at your own pace, with your own intention, your own destination, your own path, because that's the only thing you can control and influence. You can't fuck with all this other stuff because there's always going to be other stuff. Like, I guess that's the thing. Like I've learned, it's like, you cannot, like, even if you start adjusting based on that, okay, like this CryptoPunk did this, I'm going to do a PFP project because that's the thing that I think is, guess what? Yeah, it's gone. That time is gone now. By the time it's like, for example, I used to day trade. And I would trade like 1 minute, 5 minute charts off of like the US 30 open, you know, in New York time. And like, I'd get up, you know, early as fuck to trade this like minute by minute swings and scalp and shit. The number one lesson I learned from that was, by the time you recognize a trend, it's too fucking late. You're late. You're already late. It's turning the other way around. All these people that were jumping and running to Solana, for example, by the time they got there, it was over. So like, I think it's like you have to think, and the one constant has to be yourself. You can't jump around to everything. It doesn't mean not to be open-minded to new opportunities. That's a different thing. But like you can't operate because of what someone else has done already, because you're already late by definition. It's already happened for them. It's not going to happen for you. Something else is going to happen for you. But if you're constantly chasing what other people have done, you'll never achieve that because you're not them. And by the time you even get to that position, it's going to be way down the road anyways if you're trying to catch up. So like no matter what, you're always going to be behind. So try not to operate in their shadow. Start creating like the shadow of your own. You know, you got to move in your own light. I think that's how I try to look at it. That's not an easy thing to do. I'm not saying like, oh, I naturally feel this way, because I don't. It's fucking easy to feel like envious and like, fuck, man, I wish, you know, of course, that's like human nature. But it's a trained way to look at it, and you got to like slap yourself and wake up from it. I have literally slapped myself when I feel certain ways. I mean, no, I'm not going to go down that road. I refuse to go down that road. It's going to intoxicate my perspective. It's going to make me not want to create shit for the reasons I want to create shit. And I think as a creative person, you have to be in that right mindset in order to make something great. If you're not, you just simply won't. I've been in the creative field my entire professional career as well as personal. And I've been in moments where I haven't felt good about creating something, and the work that I create is shit because of it. And I know now, I've done it long enough to know that if I'm not in the right mindset, I can't create anything great. And great is the only thing that matters here. You're like creating shit. I know shit sells a lot of times, but for me personally, like I have a certain standard. Nothing's leaving my kitchen that doesn't look amazing, clean plate, perfectly executed, freshest ingredients, organic everything. I'm not fucking letting anything leave the kitchen that's not like that. And I have to be in the right mindset. I'm not just going to let shit slip out the door because I feel like I got to catch up with the restaurant down the street. I'm not going to do that. And I think that's the way you control, going back to the emotional question earlier, that's the way you control your mental state, because you got to do you, and that's it. It's good to be aware of this stuff, but it doesn't mean you got to just it's got to be this thing that shatters your whole fucking day,
Damn, Black. Thank you for that, man. What a fucking amazing answer. First of all, thank you so much for giving your time, an hour and 25 minutes. It means a lot to me, time isn't free. So thank you, man. I really appreciate all your knowledge and everything you've dropped in here. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody on Crowd. Thank you so much, guys, for sticking around and listening to this amazing conversation. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Black, thank you, man, for real. This was worth the 1 year wait, man.
Well, thank you, man. I'm happy to come chat anytime. And I appreciate the questions and just vibing overall. And I have to say, I just want to say one more thing about your work, watching what you've done in the incubator and what you've shared over the last year or so has been inspiring in itself. The last piece that you shared with walking through the full gallery museum concept is just it's absolutely mind blowing. And I think, dude, engagement doesn't matter. You're creating amazing work, and if the audience isn't here for that, then it's somewhere else for that, without a doubt. And believe in your shit, man, because it's absolutely solid. I'm not just up here trying to blow you up, but I'm saying you have talent for sure. And so it's been amazing to see that. And it's been weird to run something like the incubator and see people progress as much as they have, because I know it's not me that's done that, it's them that's done that, but I've put a space there for people to do that. And seeing that from my perspective is something I never expected. I never knew, I didn't know how it would feel. And seeing something like that just feels great. I love seeing that. And I've been happy to get to know you here in the last year or so. And yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on too.
Yeah, man. I can't thank you enough for, your compliments is gold to me, man. Nothing ever touches it. So thank you so much for putting together the incubator and everything you've done, man, because it helps a lot, and you're always there to encourage and to push, and I definitely feel like you're doing all artists an amazing service, man, and it won't be forgotten. And it's just thank you for everything, man, kind words and everything. So thank you, man, for real.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. And thanks everyone for coming through. And yeah, man, see you out in the in the
See you in the Wild West, man. See you in the Wild West.
Yeah, it's the fucking Wild West.
All right, dude, take care, man. Take care, everybody. Thank you for coming up.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for taking a moment of your time. It's